this week I have been telling you about JP Morgan, the bank that financed both sides of World War One. The bank with $56 billion invested in fossil fuels. The bank that lobbied US regulations into the bin so that they could acquire the deposits in the Chase Bank. Meanwhile, other creators that we both follow have been telling you about the risks of Palantir in the NHS. Shout out to the Scouse Oracle. Shout out to Dr. Julia. Shout out to the protesters. Shout out to Good Law Project. This is the same fight. It's JP Morgan who financed Palantir. The bank that I have been screaming at all week is the biggest owner of Palantir shares. And Palantir makes its money providing services to JP Morgan clients. So let me explain to you how this whole machine works and what Palantir technology is already doing. JP Morgan finances the extraction. Palantir is optimizing it. Example, the oil company BP is a JP Morgan client. JP Morgan also owns over 1 million shares in BP. And BP has been using Palantir software since 2014 across all of its gas and oil production. Its North Sea platforms, its Gulf of Mexico rigs, its Kazan gas fields in Oman. Palantir has been building the digital twin of BP's entire extraction infrastructure using data across 2 million sensors. But on the slides they use with investors to tell their story of success, there is a picture. Of course there is. In September 2024, BP signed a new 5-year enterprise agreement with Palantir to layer large language model AIs on top of this architecture, accelerating the operational decision making. This accelerating the operational decision making is passive language. Even when there are no humans left, the AI has been programmed to drill, baby, drill! And it's the same with ExxonMobil, who are using Palantir Foundry for fleet analytics and industrial monitoring. This is a closed loop. JP Morgan lends billions to fossil fuel companies. Those companies use that money to pay Palantir to help them extract more efficiently. When Palantir's revenue grows because of all of these new contracts, JP Morgan, who hold over 1 million shares in Palantir, get richer. JP Morgan is booking fees on all sides of the table here. The money moves in a closed circle. The carbon in the atmosphere doesn't. But here's the shocker, right? JP Morgan was Palantir's first private sector contract. Before that, Palantir had only existed inside the US intelligence community, the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, funded by In-Q-Tel, the CIA's venture capital arm. JP Morgan were their first official client and the proof of concept that this war on terror surveillance architecture could be commercialized. Without JP Morgan, there would be no Palantir. This contract did 3 things for Palantir simultaneously. Firstly, the bank financed and resourced the product development to turn this government spyware into a commercial product. The commercial product was still spyware, but instead of just tracking terrorists, it was starting to move into the civilian architecture. JP Morgan let Palantir have access to all of the bank's transactions. I should say all of the Chase Bank's transactions. It gave them access to the activity of their customers, all of the transactions in the bank, millions of financial transactions. And it gave them access to their employees and their employees' behavior. Everything from their location, their keystrokes and activity, their messages, their payroll information, everything was scooped up and handed to this private surveillance company. JP Morgan was effectively funding Palantir's R&D while paying operational fees and giving this company access to all of its employees. This is Peter Kavicya III. Until 2005, this man was a US Secret Service special agent. In 2005, although there seems to be some overlap on his LinkedIn because he did not leave the US Secret Service until January 2005. He had started in JP Morgan in November. as Assistant Director of Global Security and Investigations. He was there for 8 years. He left in 2013 and went on to First Data Corporation. He led the bank's internal rollout of the Palantir software Metropolis. His team vacuumed up all of the emails, the browser histories, the GPS data, printer information, download activity, transcripts of calls of all employees working at the bank and fed everything to Palantir. They said that was going to help them flag suspicious behavior. What you are doing is the suspicious fucking hell. An employee badging into work later than they usually did could trigger a physical search and surveillance by his team. This program imploded in 2013 when Kavitya turned the tools on the people who had authorized him to use them. The program was designed to surveil the plebs, the rank and file employees who worked at the bank, but nobody restricted what Kavitya's team could actually access. Palantir's platform was letting these analysts pull everybody's emails across the organization, including the management board, and all of their location data, call transcripts, browsing history, and badge records simultaneously. The logic should have been obvious. Once you plugged it in, once you opened up that gate, the same techniques that were going to expose juniors for insider trading could also expose senior executives for insider trading. And as soon as he started to run surveillance on the executives themselves, they had him removed. That's only one anecdote about one product line. That was not the end of the working relationship between the bank and Palantir. They kept building the panopticon, they just got rid of the one guy who was applying it equally to everyone. That process still became the template for how Palantir would sell itself to its other corporate clients. Hoovering up and surveilling everything that your employees do in the name of insider threat detection. Now, JP Morgan own 35 million shares in Palantir. That is worth $6.3 billion. But here's the full list of the top owners of Palantir shares. JP Morgan is here. Most of the shares are owned by Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, and Thiel himself. But this is a circle of stupid, because look who owns most of the shares in the JP Morgan Bank. Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street. It's the same investors. The same small cluster of asset managers own controlling or significant stakes across entire industries and across the companies that finance, surveil, and supply each other. But this is where it gets really stupid. If you confronted Vanguard with that information, if you approached them now and said, why do you own everything? Why do you own everything bad? They would say, we do not. We do not own any of this. We are fund managers. We hold shares in these companies on your behalf. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, Fidelity, they all have their own clients. It's not their money that they are buying Palantir and JP Morgan stock with. When you hear that BlackRock and Vanguard manage 30 trillion in assets, those assets are your pension savings. If you have an employer pension plan, you pay into it every month and your employer might match that. You save 100 quid a month for retirement. Your company match that. So that's 200 leaving the payroll system and going to the pension provider. The provider is BlackRock, Vanguard, Fidelity, State Street, whoever. They take your savings and use it immediately to buy shares in companies according to the fund strategy. If you choose a global index fund, or most people are just defaulted into one, every month you are actually sending 200 quid to these corporations like JP Morgan and Palantir. And the richer they get destroying the planet, the more money you're going to have at retirement when you can't use it because the planet is destroyed. Technically, every single individual saver in a pension plan has the right to vote on these strategies. But because most employees don't understand, BlackRock votes on your behalf. On your behalf, but without your informed consent, is hostage language. It is capture described as service.